Allied forces needed a fixed position in Italy. This way, they could attack the German-controlled countries and territories. Also, through Italy, they could attempt to help the Soviet Union. Italy was useful because there were several airfields that could be used to launch bombing raids to Germany. The Allied commanders expected the Italian campaign to be over quickly, but they soon discovered how difficult it was going to be to gain control of the country. The Italian campaign began with the invasion of Sicily, known as Operation Husky, on July 9, 1943. The landing conditions were very rough, and the smaller boats were thrown around. Even though the conditions were terrible, the Allies continued on with the assault. The German and Italian forces defending the beaches figured that the Allies wouldn't invade under the weather conditions, so they let their guard down, making the invasion somewhat easier. The airborne troops were scattered across the countryside because of strong winds. Very few of them reached their targets. Within the following hours, Hitler realized how strong the invasion was. He canceled an attack on the Eastern Front and sent troops to Italy to defend the mainland. The city of Syracuse was taken by the British on July 10th, and Augusta fell 3 days later. Most of the early battles ended quickly, without much opposition. The only heavy opposition was at the Battle of Gela. American forces were met with heavy resistance. The troops encountered a German tank division headed by Hermann Göring. The Americans were pushed back far, almost back to the beachheads. German tanks attempted to cross over the bridgehead, but were blown to pieces by 2 cruisers sitting offshore. General Patton pushed his way into Palermo during July 22nd. On July 24th, Mussolini was arrested, and a new government was set up under Marshal Pietro Badoglio. The Allies were slowed down when they met with German resistance at Adrano. The British overcame the Germans at Adrano, and the Americans were relieved. They pushed into Italy. On September 3rd, the British landed in southern Italy. The Americans landed in Salerno on September 9th, and the Italian government was quick to surrender. Within the following weeks, the Allied forces rapidly captured the southern portion of the country. By December, German forces were pushed all the way back to the Liri Valley, just south of Rome. The British pushed up the east coast and were met with heavy resistance. The U.S. continued to push through the region of Cassino, also known as the Gustav Line. Allied and Axis forces came to a stalemate on opposite sides of the Rapido River. Eventually, the area was bombed. The spring offensive began on May 11th, and the Gustav Line was broken in less than a month. British and U.S. troops reached Rome on June 4, 1944. The Germans fell back past the Arno River, and they retreated into the heavily defended mountains. The British, once again, moved along the east coast. The Allies began to pull troops out of Italy and send them to France for the invasion of Normandy. This left an insufficient amount of soldiers on the Italian mainland. The Germans were holed up in the Apennine Mountains. The Allies wanted to avoid attacking the heavily defended main crossing, so instead, they attacked Il Giaggio Pass. The fighting was literally an uphill battle, and the casualties were heavy for the Allies. Men continued to be removed and sent to France. The fighting, again, turned into a stalemate once the winter began. In February, the tide began to turn. The highly trained 10th Mountain Division was brought in, and was very effective in the snowy mountains. In April, the British assaulted the area of Bologna. After the fall of the city, the Allies were able to move out of the Apennine Mountains, and they moved on toward the Po River Valley. The Allied forces tore through the Po River Valley and forced the Germans to retreat to the Alps. Mussolini, along with many other fascist leaders, was executed by partisans. Mussolini's body was strung up in public, and the Italian citizens saw this as a sign of liberation. Overall, the Italian campaign was a success. The beach landings were organized better than those previously. The Allies gained the European foothold that they needed, and Italy was forced into surrendering. This all came at a cost, though. There were 300,000 casualties amongst the US and British armies. The German and Italian forces, however, suffered 434,000 casualties.